My 7-year-old daughter saved me from losing my empire with a single sentence, but her trembling whisper destroyed my entire family in seconds. I'm Roxanne. On the outside, I had the perfect life. I was a successful real estate mogul with a portfolio of properties I had built from nothing. I thought I had the ultimate support system, my charming husband, Gregory, and my loyal sister, Jillian. I trusted them so completely that when they suggested I go on a wellness retreat to a remote cabin with no cell service, I thought it was an act of love. I was packing my bags that evening, feeling grateful for a family that wanted me to rest. But the truth was waiting for me in my daughter's bedroom. I went to tuck my 7-year-old, Rose, into bed, expecting a hug. Instead, she grabbed my arm with cold, shaking hands. She pulled me close, her eyes wide with the terror no child should ever feel. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Daddy and Auntie Jillian, they're wrestling in the guest room again. And Daddy told her that when you go on your trip tomorrow, they're going to sign the papers to take all your properties." My blood turned to ice. I looked at the baby monitor on her nightstand. Downstairs, Gregory was pouring wine for my own sister. They were laughing, a sound that used to make me smile, but now sounded like a knife sharpening. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked out of that room with one cold realization. The two people I loved most were wolves, and I was the sheep they planned to slaughter. Before we continue with the story, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future updates. Also, let me know in the comments, what time is it right now where you are, and which city are you watching from? I love reading your answers. The air in the hallway felt thin, like I was breathing underwater. Every step down the stairs was a battle against the scream building in my throat. Downstairs, the soft clinking of glass against glass echoed, a sound of celebration. They were toasting. To my departure. To my ruin. I reached the bottom step and saw them. Gregory was sitting on the plush beige sofa I had paid for, his arm draped casually over the back, inches from my sister's shoulder. Jillian was laughing at something he'd said, her head thrown back, exposing her neck in a way that was far too familiar, far too intimate. Seeing them like that, comfortable in the home I built, made my stomach turn. "Roxanne!" Gregory's voice was warm, dripping with that charm that had blinded me for 10 years. "All packed for the retreat? You look tense, darling." "Just tired," I lied, forcing the corners of my mouth up. It felt like cracking porcelain. Rose had a nightmare. She needed comforting. Jillian took a sip of her wine. My favorite vintage, I noted bitterly. "Poor thing," she cooed, her eyes scanning my face with a predator's precision. "Well, you won't have to worry about a thing starting tomorrow. No cell service, no emails, just total relaxation. We'll hold down the fort." We. The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. She wasn't just my sister in that moment. She was the woman waiting to take my place. I walked over to the kitchen island, needing distance, needing to grip the cold marble counter to stop my hands from shaking. "I really appreciate you organizing this, Jillian," I said, my back to them so they couldn't see the tears stinging my eyes. "It's exactly what I needed." "Anything for you, sis," she replied. I heard the smile in her voice. "You deserve a break. You've been working so hard on those new property deeds. You need to clear your head." The deeds. Rose hadn't misunderstood. They weren't just cheating. They were counting down the hours until I was gone so they can rob me blind. I turned around, my mask firmly in place. "You're right. I do need to clear my head." Gregory stood up and walked over, placing a kiss on my forehead. His lips felt like a brand. "Go get some sleep, my love. Tomorrow is a big day." Yes, I whispered, looking from him to my sister, engraving this image of betrayal into my mind. I walked back upstairs, leaving them to their wine and their secrets. They thought I was the tired wife going to bed. They had no idea I was the soldier preparing for war. The house was dead silent. The only sound was the blood rushing in my ears, louder than the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. It was 2 a.m. Gregory was asleep next to me, or pretending to be. His breathing steady, his arm thrown carelessly over the pillow where my head should have been. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. I needed proof. Rose's whisper was a warning, but I needed a weapon. I crept into Gregory's home office. The room smelled of his cologne and the stale scent of secrets. I didn't dare turn on the light. Moonlight sliced through the blinds, illuminating his mahogany desk. I went straight for his briefcase. He always kept it locked, but I had watched him dial the combination 1,000 times. Left to 0, right to 4, left to 8. The click was deafening in the quiet room. My hands shook uncontrollably as I flipped through the files. Project Alpha, tax returns, and then a blue folder with no label. I opened it. General Power of Attorney. I scanned the legal jargon, my eyes burning. It wasn't just a standard form, it was a trap. Effective immediately upon the principal's check-in at Serenity Peak's retreat. Tears blurred my vision, hot and angry. He knew. He knew the retreat had no signal. He knew I would be completely cut off from the world. I turned the page and saw the witness signature. Jillian. My own sister had signed the death warrant for my life's work. A sob caught in my throat, but I swallowed it down. It tasted like bile. They had planned this for months. While I was building our future, they were drafting my end. I took a photo of the document with my phone, my hands steadying with a new, cold resolve. I placed the folder back exactly as I found it. I locked the briefcase. I walked back to the bedroom, lay down next to the man who planned to destroy me, and stared at the ceiling. Let him sleep. Let him think he won. Because when the sun rises, the Roxanne he knew would be gone. I sat in the cold leather chair across from Corey's desk, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles turned white. Corey was a man of few words, a forensic accountant who saw the world in black and white numbers. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with the grim precision of a surgeon finding a tumor. "It's subtle, Roxanne," Corey said, his voice low. "If you weren't looking for it, you'd never see it. $50 here, $100 there, hidden as maintenance costs or vendor fees from your rental properties." He clicked a button and a spreadsheet filled the screen. It looked like a bleeding wound, red numbers everywhere, dripping down the columns. "For how long?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 8 months, Corey replied. 8 months. While I was cooking them dinner, while I was planning family holidays, Gregory was slowly bleeding me dry. But the worst was yet to come. "Where is it going, Corey?" I asked. "Is it a hidden offshore account?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. He pointed to a recurring account number at the top of the list. "I traced the routing number," he said softly. "It's not a shell company, Roxanne. It's a personal savings account." He looked me dead in the eye. "It belongs to Jillian." The room spun. My husband wasn't just stealing from me. He was taking the money I earned, the sweat from my brow, the time away from my daughter, and giving it to my sister. They were building a nest egg on my back. Every family dinner, every smile she gave me across the table, she was already spending my money. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and humiliating, but I didn't wipe it away. I let it fall, marking the moment the sadness died and the rage took over. "Print it," I said, my voice trembling with a dark, quiet fury. "Print every single page." The screen in the van flickered. Grainy black and white footage from the hidden camera Ron had buttoned onto Gregory's jacket. I watched my life crumble in real time. They were in the car, speeding down the highway toward the notary office. The audio was crisp, cutting through my heart like a serrated blade. They were laughing. Not nervous laughter, joyous, unbridled laughter. The kind of happiness you feel on your wedding day or when you win the lottery. "She's crossing the pass right now," Gregory said, checking his Rolex, the one I bought him for our 10th anniversary. "Signal dead. Empire, ours." "God, finally," Jillian sighed, applying fresh lipstick in the passenger mirror. "Do you know how hard it was to hug her this morning? She smelled like desperation." I flinched in the dark van. Ron looked away, giving me a moment of privacy as a sob escaped my lips. "She was my baby sister. I used to braid her hair. I paid for her college. And here she was, painting her lips red to celebrate my funeral." The car stopped. The camera angle shifted as they got out. They walked into the notary office not with shame, but with a swagger. They were high on adrenaline, drunk on the idea of stealing millions. They approached the front desk. Gregory slammed the blue folder down. The power of attorney. "We have an urgent transfer," he announced, his voice booming with arrogant authority. "My wife is unavailable, and we need to execute the sale of the Riverside complex immediately. The buyer is waiting." Jillian leaned against him, her hand on his lower back. It was a victory lap. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I was lost in the mountains, blind and deaf to their treachery. I leaned closer to the monitor, my tears drawing into cold tracks of salt. I whispered to the screen, my voice trembling with a dark, vengeful promise. "Go ahead," I whispered to the screen, my voice trembling with a dark, vengeful promise. "Sign it. Sign your lives away." Ron moved through my house like a shadow. He was quick, efficient, screwing a tiny device into the base of the kitchen chandelier while I stood guard by the window, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. It felt like a violation, bugging my own sanctuary, the place where I had nursed Rose, where I had cooked holiday dinners. But the real violation had already happened. "It's done," Ron said, his voice void of emotion. He led me out to his van parked down the street. "Put these on." He handed me a pair of heavy, noise-canceling headphones. I slid them over my ears, and suddenly the world went silent, until he flipped a switch. The sound of my own kitchen filled my head, crystal clear. I heard the fridge door open, I heard the clink of wine glasses, and then I heard her. "God, she's so pathetic," Jillian's voice sneered. It wasn't the sweet, supportive voice she used to ask me for loans. It was sharp, venomous. "Did you see her face when I suggested the retreat? She looked like a lost puppy." "Thank you, Jillian. I really need this." She mimicked me. My own sister was mocking my gratitude. "She's tired, Jill," Gregory's voice chimed in, not defending me, but dismissing me. "Let her sleep. She needs her rest for the drive." "I don't care if she sleeps," Jillian laughed, a cruel, cackling sound that made my stomach lurch. "I just need her gone, because once she's at that retreat, once she crosses into that dead zone, the Empire is ours." The Empire is ours. Tears streamed down my face, hot and fast, soaking the foam of the headphones. I curled in on myself, hugging my knees to my chest. I had paid for her tuition. I had held her hand when she got her heart broken. I had given her a job, a home, a purpose. And to her, I was just an obstacle. I was just a bank account with a pulse. I took the headphones off, my hands trembling violently. I didn't want to hear anymore. I didn't need to. The sister I loved was dead. The woman in that kitchen was a stranger, and tomorrow I would treat her like one. The morning sun felt like a spotlight on a stage. I was the lead actress in the final act of a tragedy. Gregory loaded my suitcase into the trunk, the suitcase I knew I wouldn't be unpacking. He turned to me, flashing that dazzling smile that used to make my knees weak. Now, it just looked like a baring of teeth. "Call us when you get close to the mountain pass," he said, smoothing my hair, "before you lose signal." "I will," I lied. He leaned in and kissed me. It took every ounce of my willpower not to recoil. His lips felt poisonous. I was kissing the man who, just hours ago, had laughed about erasing me. Then came Jillian, my sister, my blood. She pulled me into a tight hug, smelling of lavender and deceit. "Don't worry about the properties, Roxy. We'll handle everything." "I know you will." I pulled away to look her in the eye. "I trust you." I got into the car and drove. I watched them in the rearview mirror, standing side by side, waving. A perfect couple. A perfect lie. The moment I turned the corner, my face crumbled. I pulled over 3 blocks away, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, gasping for air. I didn't drive to the mountains. I drove to the one place loyalty still existed. Grandma Marion was waiting on her porch, her face set in a grim line. Rose ran into her arms, burying her face in her grandmother's apron. My mother looked at me, her eyes wet but fierce. She knew. I had told her everything. "Go," Marion said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Finish this. I've got my grandbaby. No one touches her." I kissed Rose's head, smelling her shampoo, reminding myself why I was doing this. Then I got back in the car. I didn't drive to the mountains. I drove 2 miles east, parked behind an abandoned warehouse, and opened the back door of Ron's van. "They're moving," Ron said without looking up. I sat down in front of the monitors. The show was about to begin. The screen in the van flickered. Grainy black and white footage from the hidden camera Ron had buttoned onto Gregory's jacket. I watched my life crumble in real time. They were in the car, speeding down the highway toward the notary office. The audio was crisp, cutting through my heart like a serrated blade. They were laughing. Not nervous laughter. Joyous, unbridled laughter. The kind of happiness you feel on your wedding day or when you win the lottery. "She's crossing the pass right now," Gregory said, checking his Rolex, the one I bought him for our 10th anniversary. Signal dead. Empire ours. "God, finally," Jillian sighed, applying fresh lipstick in the passenger mirror. Do you know how hard it was to hug her this morning? She smelled like desperation. I flinched in the dark van. Ron looked away, giving me a moment of privacy as a sob escaped my lips. She was my baby sister. I used to braid her hair. I paid for her college. And here she was, painting her lips red to celebrate my funeral. The car stopped. The camera angle shifted as they got out. They walked into the notary's office not with shame, but with a swagger. They were high on adrenaline, drunk on the idea of stealing millions. They approached the front desk. Gregory slammed the blue folder down. The power of attorney. "We have an urgent transfer," he announced, his voice booming with arrogant authority. "My wife is unavailable, and we need to execute the sale of the Riverside complex immediately. The buyer is waiting." Jillian leaned against him, her hand on his lower back. It was a victory lap. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I was lost in the mountains, blind and deaf to their treachery. I leaned closer to the monitor, my tears drying into cold tracts of salt. I whispered to the screen, my voice trembling with a dark, vengeful promise. "Go ahead," I whispered to the screen, my voice trembling with a dark, vengeful promise. "Sign it. Sign your lives away." The notary didn't stamp the papers. She didn't smile. She stared at her computer screen, her brow furrowing in confusion, then hardened into professional suspicion. "Is there a problem?" Gregory asked, his voice tight with impatience. "My wife is waiting for confirmation." "Mr. Montgomery," said the notary, pushing the blue folder back across the desk, "I cannot execute this transfer. This power of attorney is invalid." "Excuse me," Jillian snapped, stepping forward. "That is a legal document. She signed it herself." "And she revoked it," the notary replied calmly, "at 8:05 this morning, along with the freeze on all associated assets initiated by her attorney, Mr. Carlyle." The color drained from Gregory's face so fast it looked like he was dying. He looked at Jillian. She looked back, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The arrogance was gone. The laughter was dead. All that was left was fear. I sat in the van, my thumb hovering over the call button on my phone. I watched Gregory pull out his own phone, his hand shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. He was probably trying to check the bank accounts that Corey had already locked down. I pressed the button. On the monitor, Gregory's phone lit up. The shrill ringtone cut through the silence of the office. He stared at the screen. "Wife," he answered, his voice trembling, a desperate attempt to salvage the lie. "Roxanne? Honey, is everything okay? Did you reach the cabin?" "I'm not at the cabin, Gregory." I was ice cold, but tears were streaming down my face. "I'm 2 blocks away, watching you try to sell the life I built." "Roxanne, listen, I can explain," he stammered, sweating profusely. "Save it," I cut him off. "I saw the folder, I heard the recording, I know about the $50 transfers to Jillian. But mostly, I know what you said about me." "Roxy, please," Jillian's voice came through the background, shrill and terrified. "It's a misunderstanding." "Shut up, Jillian," I whispered. "You lost the right to call me sister the moment you signed that witness line." Gregory was hyperventilating now, looking around the office as if the walls were closing in. He choked out. "How? How did you know?" I took a deep breath, looking at the photo of my little girl on my dashboard. I said, "Did you really think," my voice breaking with the weight of a mother's rage, "that I wouldn't listen to our daughter?" The door to the notary office swung open with the weight of judgment. Carlyle stepped in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. He didn't look like a lawyer anymore. He looked like an executioner in a 3-piece suit. "Gregory Montgomery, Jillian Hart," Carlyle announced, his voice cutting through their panic. He slammed a stack of documents onto the desk. "You are being served with immediate restraining orders and a notice of investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud." Gregory slumped against the wall, his face buried in his hands. Jillian tried to reach for him, but he flinched away from her touch. The perfect couple crumbled into dust right there on the cheap office carpet. I watched from the van as the police escorted them out. Separate cars, separate lives, leaving with nothing but the shame they deserved. 5 years doesn't erase the scar, but it heals the wound. I stood in the front row of the auditorium, clapping until my hands hurt. Rose, now 12 years old and brilliant, walked across the stage to accept her Academic Excellence Award. She scanned the crowd, found me, and smiled. It was a smile free of fear, a smile that said we had won. That night, after Rose went to sleep, I sat by the fireplace with a glass of wine. On the table lay a letter that arrived that morning. The envelope was cheap, the handwriting shaky. Gregory. He wrote about his small apartment. He wrote that Jillian leaving him when the money ran out. He wrote that he missed us, that he was sorry. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I felt absolutely nothing. I tossed the unopened letter into the fire. I watched the flames curl around his name, turning his apologies into ash. The sparks flew up the chimney, disappearing into the night, just like he had. I had my empire, I had my daughter, and I had the peace of knowing that the wolves were gone for good. Now, I have a question for you, and I want you to be honest in the comments. If you found out your own sister was plotting with your husband to steal your life and your children, would you burn the letter like I did, or would you forgive them because they are family? Let me know below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.